Just to let you know, if you were wondering, it's recording in progress. All right, good morning. Let's start with Lamrim Kappa Guru Yoga. From the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of the Shita on the peak of cloud resembling Clapham. I'll just make it bigger, just a second, sorry. And we'll start again. All right. From the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of the Shita on the peak of cloud resembling Clapham of extremely white, fresh curd, king of Dhamma, omniscient Losan Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me, in a lying throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme fill of merit from my mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations is as ear and ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strive for much learning and practicing in this degenerate age and make your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect pure holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teaching on all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of the perfect pure Losan Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sashi Paki Jushimeto Tamri Rablingshi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindu Mite Hoa Hirdoku Namda Shila Chupashu. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lamrim Kappa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to practice, commit, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one, Losan Drakpa, who had a morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageous in extensive conduct of the son of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idang Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure father and sons, and combining into one, enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows on the opening of tube of white light, cleansing my sicknesses, spirits harm, negative karmas, obscurations, and the imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So we're going to do the recitation of the 5-line Mixima 3 times. Mimetse wete chen chen rezi, Jime kembe wambo jambe yan, Dupo malo jomze sanweda, Kanchen gebe tunge tunga pa, Losan drape sham la sowade, Mimetse wete chen chen rezi, Jime kembe wambo jambe yan, Dupo malo jomze sanweda, Kanchen gebe tunge tunga pa, Losan drape sham la sowade, Mimetse wete chen chen rezi, Jime kembe wambo jambe yan, Dupo malo jomze sanweda, Kanchen kembe tunge tunga pa, Losan drape sham la sowade.
Sanji Chedam Toji
Togi chonam la,
Chonamla
chanchu
Chanchu
bardu
Bardu
dandi
Dami
kyabsu
Kyabsu
chi,
Chi Dagi Chushi Gibi
Tsonam,
Drola
Drola
Pechi
penchi
Sanji
sangye rupara
Druparasho
sho,
Sanji
Chodan
Chedam
togi
Toji
chonam
Chonamla
chanchu
Chanchu
bardu
Bardu
dandi
Dami
kyabsu
Kyabsu
chi,
Dagi
Dagi
Chushi
chisa
Gibi
gibe tsonangi, Drola penchi
Sanji
sangye rupara sho.
Druparasho Sanji
Chondan
Chedam
togi
Toji
chonam la,
Chonamla
chanchu
Chanchu
bardu
Bardu
dandi
Dami
kyabsu
Kyabsu
chi,
Dagi
Dagi chisa
Chushi
gibe
Gibi
tsonangi, Drola penchi
Sanji
sangye rupara
Druparasho Kanki tuzenye zone dawa tamje pambi chere tambi chun denze kodam jela chance lo. Good morning everyone. 생점 딱딱하게 하고 있을까?
Tira.
시발 합jas 뒷점래 말아 시발이.
പക്ഷെ sumba nitso pabrikansan na yin la deyan.
그래.
Demarbe.
겸들어.
Gendun.
다가즈 생점은 뭐 럭샤기 있으라. 생점은 뭐 숨바조 파브리칸산나이라스. 다 겐든 건조 조디 아니 레타 캡숨 모트치온디 산지 추겐드숨 아니 산지 연데 추기 연데 겐든 연데 셋다 겐든 연데 셰게 겐든디 조 파비 칸자노레스 댄 추기 연데 텐데 추진도 드비 건네 템퍼처디 최한다고 두버 댄도스.
We are looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's milling presentation of the states of the path to enlightenment. And currently we're covering the section that explains going for refuge. Now, in the outline for going for refuge, we've covered the first section, which is covering the causes for going for refuge. We looked at identifying the objects of refuge, and now we're looking at the way that we go for refuge through distinctions that are made with respect to the objects of knowledge, object of refuge. So we spoke about the Buddha and the Dhamma, and today we're going to pick up from the third object of refuge, which is the Sangha. So looking at the text. Sorry, that's not the text. Right. The excellent qualities of the Sangha. Just make it slightly bigger. So this section says, this refers mainly to the persons who are Aryas. Recollecting the excellent qualities of the Dhamma, you're mindful of those who accomplish it correctly. That is the intention of the compendium of the teachings.
What do you mean, Karsa? Okay.
Graham. Yeah. Go ahead. So Graham, you were a little bit late. Came in, did three frustrations, but you might get a penalty rate. You might have to do 9.
Horta ine tamadi migin rosara dus cheni yalan digi onchina yalani and dus che and chena dotan roj tindres.
Oh.
Can yalani kabdu kubyagal but this one.
I guess I said that you were missing some parts of the last one, right? So you were kind of doing the last one. Normally kind of you rise up and you do again touch your forehead, throat, and heart. You missed out on this one. You said straight away, so you might get an extra penalty rate.
이내 차세다니 빌로니 상가스 포사지 차세다로 줄라.
However, it seems that kind of the way that you made it was kind of full of energy, like a 25-year-old guy. So.
terda gendung yonden tiandi gendung yonden zodi chugi yonden di ro chugi yonden sujin de dribi gone ani temba chigo res tadi nenga zo tichigros ro.
Anyway, in going back to the text, we're looking at the qualities of the Sangha. So the Sangha are regarded as an object of refuge on account of the qualities of the Dhamma jewel.
Pena zö nalolaya ngombo zög nalolaya ani chi gendun chebi chechu di gendu konjo ta charamawegi sheondi gendu konjo di gendun chebi chechu laya ani gendu konjo shagor mado ani bigi chi pallam gyul dembi gi kansa di shagmari sevzore ta tu jidan nenga jirendos tande dinalo sonya de ya chu gi yonde chujin du tembi koni ani temba chegore said gendun di kane chawareslana ani chu kunjo rangula dembana ani kansa di gendun kunjo chaware mado shemba gendun kunjo chayagi gyujin shemba ki yomarwas tinza ta zo di ani sangi inanda chu gendun slawandi zo di ani chu di chagoras ra kyab bi kyawi shawndi ya kyab ngodi ani chu kunjo la shaya tiso anda number sangi bi chu ta tomai bi keju ti chagoras ra.
When the section says, recollecting the excellent qualities of the Dhamma, you are mindful of those who accomplish it correctly. And in this way, stating that the Sangha jewel becomes Sangha jewel on account of possessing the Dhamma jewel in the mind stream. It is a very special presentation, particularly when you look at other Buddhist systems, like, for example, the one that is based on the Abhidhamma, which speaks of the third object of refuge, the Sangha, and it describes the qualities of the persons who are Sangha, but not in relation to the Dhamma jewel. Just given the qualities of the Sangha is different to what Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining here. Here he says that actually someone becomes an object of refuge as Sangha on account of having the Dhamma jewel in the mind stream, which means on account of having true paths and true cessations in the mind stream, which makes it a really special presentation, a unique Dhamma presentation, which explains how the three objects of refuge work. The actual Dhamma refuge, the actual refuge is the Dhamma refuge. And that being the case, then looking at the other objects of refuge, the Buddha is a teacher of refuge, the Dhamma being the actual object of refuge, and the Sangha become an object of refuge from the point of view of having the actual refuge, true paths and true cessations, the Dhamma jewel, in the mind stream.
Tenza ta dini ma ta tengu dasra pena nipa dowa ni jongwa dar kunjo sum nam penzu gi kyabar shini kyabsun drowa se dige nenga chik tengo rasra kasna manzo sangi se di ani khal teni sangi shagdo ani karal teni sangi komban drudo dishi on digi ani chu konala teni chu konal teni sangi yungori mado shamba sangi mundo asra tenanshin gi gendun kunjo shaya chu le teni gendun kunjo shaya tenza sangi di pigi ta chu tembo bu imbi chani ani nganzu kyawi le ya ngunzen chiya ngusu kyamngen di ani chu kunjo tenza ani chu kunjo tele ya kyam ngosha ta dindigi ani chu di drobar chebala chujin drobar chebala ya ta chi nyamnyong da dindigi tonde trochi tungen di gendun kunjo de chagonza ani kyab drubi daro imbi kone ani kyawi le sha jaba di disungorasra di injimi gi kyabar shini ani kyawi kunjo sonla ya kyabsun rogores
That brings us to the next point in the text. So understanding the particularities of the objects of refuge begins with saying, as it is apparent from the compendium of determination, you go for refuge aware of the distinctions between the three jewels, which means that when you're aware of the qualities of the objects of refuge and also those distinctions that we have just made, you understand that, for example, a Buddha becomes Buddha independent upon the Dhamma jewel. When you develop an understanding of what a Buddha is, you wonder what makes someone become Buddha. It depends upon what that person becomes Buddha. It is only depending upon the Dhamma jewel that one can become Buddha. And similarly, as we just demonstrated, also someone becomes a Sangha through possessing the Dhamma jewel in the mind stream, which means that one can only become a Sangha jewel depending upon the Dhamma jewel. So we regard a Buddha as the teacher of the Dhamma, which means that again, in relation to the Dhamma, the person becomes a teacher of the Dhamma, that's the Buddha. Whereas the actual refuge is the Dhamma jewel. And then depends upon practicing the Dhamma jewel, and then one becomes a Sangha, helping others, assisting others in accomplishing their refuge, which means that here in this presentation, when we understand the distinctions that are drawn with respect to the objects of refuge, we also see how the Dhamma jewel is the main refuge.
아니 람님부디 송르지는 로고레스 덴디델이야 꺄응거다 아니 겐된라 꺄드비 다도스 송유고니 꺄순 조데 도와자체들은 좀 따로스.
This is what the next section says. In looking at the way of going for refuge through assertion, so you can also say through commitments. So as it is apparent in the commentary on the sutra on the discipline, it says we should go for refuge in terms of considering the Buddha to be the one who teaches the refuge, the Dhamma to be nirvana, which is the actual refuge, and the Sangha to be the companions who accomplish refuge.
어디래 닌자 때 비기 추디 아니 추디 카렌도 다 주디 냥데레셋 추 냥엘인데 봐다 냥데슬라온디 다 뉴문바다 아니 시지드바 파차다 제바 빵비기 아니 세비기 세자디 냥데 뭐 티차고레스 다 티당 비기 다지 가서 베나 뉴무 아니 파차다 제바 시지드바 파차다 제바 빵마도나 비기 랭가 아니 지 빵비 빵바지여러스 티야 아니 추군조 응원나라야 수고레스 아니 디 지비기 탑 베나 다음에 뭔숨 더비 이시다고 아니 통람 더디야 아니 추군조나리아 추군조 차고레스로 다 간지 디님보디 아니 다음에 뭔숨 더비 이시디 제다 뉴몬비 응이로 뉴몬비 응이 차고레스 다 걔는 다음에 봐 탈버 텐드니비 로제네 아니 다음에 봐 더비 로검 and digi sidenta wadeleya ta magi chubung sudumla soba odin digi ani nyamlen chin drona ani tarbi komba dachumi komba toptu yores ta dini ani dame bangosum to bi ishidi ani shiji dibi nimbolai droyela ya ani inchi minchi gi digi ani karso ta chi gyapden da masuna tro da masuna ani chanjugu semle ya tengoya chi ro chanjugu semle ya ten songre chin drona 아니 CCTV기 아니 니모드로투야 탈 산지 콤보 톱투야디 엔 탑신이 손적 돈이 로단디 송여와스로 인자 딘디기 추 템보 포텔야 아니 캡 템보 보기 아니 캡티 차고레스
Here it says in a text in relation to the Dhamma jewels that we hold the Dhamma jewel to be nirvana, right? The Dhamma to be nirvana, which is the actual refuge. So nirvana, or literally We can translate it as transcending sorrow, transcending suffering. It is the elimination, the exhaustion of, first of all, afflictive obscurations, but on top of that also cognitive obscurations, which means the elimination of obscurations together with their imprints. So the complete exhaustion, the complete elimination of all obscurations, afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations, imprints and so forth, that complete exhaustion is what we call nirvana, transcending sorrow. But until we reach that complete elimination of all obscurations, we attain bit by bit those partial eliminations of obscurations, partial elimination of afflictive obscurations, cognitive obscurations. They are also included within nirvana. So that's one part of the Dhamma jewel. Then we have the development of true paths, perceptual realizations of emptiness. Like, for example, the path of seeing, which perceptually realizes emptiness. This is also a Dhamma jewel in that it constitutes an actual antidote to afflictive obscurations, to cognitive obscurations. From the viewpoint of being the actual antidote, the direct antidote to afflictions, it is also an actual Dhamma jewel, Dhamma refuge. So then in order to develop that, we begin with, first of all, developing an understanding of selflessness. We meditate on selflessness. We also do that on the basis of cultivating ethical discipline, such as, for example, ethical discipline, which abstains from the 10 non-virtues. And through that, we progress bit by bit to the development of the actual Dhamma jewel, which results in the state of liberation, ourselves attaining the state of an arhat, someone that is free from samsara. We use the same perceptual realization of emptiness as the actual antidote to not only afflictive obscurations, but also to cognitive obscurations. And in order to do so, we need to develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. If we develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, we can then use that in combination with a perceptual realization of emptiness in order to eliminate our cognitive obscurations and thereby at the end to attain the state of omniscience, the state of Buddha. Which means that in this way we cultivate both method and wisdom, method being bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, and wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness, in order to, at the end, attain the state of omniscience, the state of Buddha. Then we have the one that taught us how to do it, the teacher of refuge, the Buddha. So from the viewpoint of the one that taught us how to attain the actual refuge, the teacher of refuge is Buddha, and therefore for us, the Buddha also becomes refuge.
There digitigi tanganzo nyamning go tambodi ani kamdru toni tsugugras. Tinza kamdru toni tsugsu di ani kamdru ji rangula ya kiwi gone ani go tsugonza kamdru rangula ya kiela ya ani kawyul inji minigta ngu sambachik machona ani kavyu telaya kavsun rotsuchik ta yabuchi yungumaro ta meban ro da che chor de ne ya ta meba che de chang ge digor de ne ya ta one thane ge chi pu tabo ge kamro de yong ya la ya kavyu li jimin ji ta ngosen go ya de pe masib kesim re do asra tinza kavyu ngosen bala ya kavyu konjo sum shane sangi di kav kharendo kav tembo bu imbi chani kavyu shawa di ngosen go goras ta sangi kav tembo bu imba di 아니 상기기 땜비기 쭉 토네 아니 쭉 토네 상기디 캡템보 보임바디 몬트 고야 디다 nenga 타투 바지 차거도 왔어라 디 차바이나 아니 지비기 탑시 니기 추출디 탑 잔주그 샘다 아니 셔럽 동번이 또비기 셔럽기 권이 아니 타와드 탐지 김비기 람르주그 르맛병인디 수된 투구도나야 Tela ani ichichi tebachina dan digores di digores ro di mato ngansu degyuti ani tawad tamji kimbi kombala yarewa gap ani pigi ichichisa di ani lam shinjulo tendingijila ya ichichi bana no digores digomars ro
How do you mane di la
lamdin shinjulo lamdin chu shinjulo tendingijila ya
oh yeah lamdin refuge for us becomes a gateway to our practice, in a sense that when we go for refuge, it makes a practice become a Buddhist practice. When we generate refuge in our mind stream, our practice becomes a Buddhist practice. Without identifying precisely what the objects of refuge are, our Buddhist practice will not result well. We're not going to have a good refuge in a mind stream. Of course, we can have refuge in a mind stream based on devotion, but it does not mean to say that the refuge that we have in a mind stream is going to be an excellent refuge. To have an excellent refuge in a mind stream, we do need to identify more precisely what the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are. So the Buddha, for example, is the one that taught us the refuge, which means that through teaching us the refuge, the Dhamma, as we said that the Dhamma is the actual refuge, through teaching us the Dhamma, the Buddha becomes a refuge for us. The method for attaining the state of liberation and enlightenment, as taught by the Buddha in the Dhamma, the Dhamma methods are the development of methods and also the development of wisdom. Through that, we then proceed along the path that leads to liberation and omniscience, which means that through understanding those particularities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and so forth, we develop trust and develop faith in the objects of refuge. Otherwise, if we do not develop an understanding of what constitutes the objects of refuge, what is the Buddha, what is Dhamma, what is the Sangha, we might wish for liberation and enlightenment, and yet we might rely upon someone that teaches us erroneous path that will not result in those states, will not result in liberation or enlightenment. So then we really need to identify precisely what makes the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha become objects of refuge.
탑the sheriff sing인디 산지 송샤에 탑the sheriff sing인들이야 간둔 두문도 로 딩무연네 수지 작은 두문도 딘디 돌에 데스지 당한 드럼 드리질 레사인스 디 이지면 심죽 마치 봐나 아니 샘라야 대박이야 백하부여서 상구도스로 저 딘디 아니 수수 롭종 가나 간섬지 여지 되니 비게 아니 삽기 추술 냠바이나 되니직 추수에 니 야부직 시에도 추응어마지 수시에도 수시에문도 세지 요라 디텐데 아니 고츠토 그랬어 아니 딘 고츠토 다직 추 야부싱이질이야 비기 셰버자 마세 전라야 라는 따딩이질이야 아니 또는 좋토 바이나 되니 자자자다만 니만니말이야 소소소 아니 야기도야지 용그레스라 딘 매바이나 가서 다치 셰야다 라렌님고 디자와 니네 라마통인지 내가 뚝 대바이나 아니 소소 디디 차야겠다 닌가 열어왔어.
In that sense, we need to make sure that we can draw the line between what is a correct or incorrect explanation, and also to make sure that those lines are not crossed, in a sense that if we do not kind of draw a line, and in our way of developing a certain understanding, we reach internal contradictions in our understanding, in that whatever we have come to know about the Dhamma actually cannot be held together. We reach some internal contradictions. It's not going to help us in our personal practice. So then in learning how to draw those lines in terms of our understanding, we ask ourselves certain questions, like, for example, does it contradict, for example, the type of wisdom as developed by the Dhamma? Is it in line with reality, or is it not in line with reality? Such is the way that we approach the development of our understanding. particularly given that Geshe reckons that in a general sense, it seems that in the 21st century, it's harder for people to develop faith. So then we need to look at what is our approach to the development of faith. So when we study from a particular person. So we can ask ourselves, for example, is the explanation that we get, does it fit our understanding? Do we get a good explanation? Is the explanation getting or going deeper and deeper? Do we have a more profound understanding of reality? So it's important to make such assessments when we study. So then when we allow ourselves to make such assessments, and through that we know how to draw the line between what is good explanation, what is not good explanation, what is going deeper and what is not, it also influences our practice. Through that we put the Dhamma into practice, and through that we can also make daily improvements. Otherwise, if we do not follow the process, Geshe reckons, without reaching certain determinations, without making determinations and then taking it on into a practice, we might end up sometimes in states which would be dangerous to a spiritual progress.
Terda ta chö nyande la ya kyab ngo dushi sha ko se ti ta keche shu di ta ro kyab ngo di ngone nganzu ge dewan degu yori dungan degu yo maros ta chik debe gi tar tu ba di ani tawa nyande ji komba di chagoras ta di nyande se di zo khares laundi nyumu sebe sebatele ya ro nganzu nyumu mariba dacha shedan chikse deagi ani rig di and this sebi sejatele ya ani tawa nyande se gores ta dindi sebi sejadi sosu gule ke tubaina ani tawa toba se di tila gores telaya di gule dimbe kansa telaya gendu kunjosana dindijliya zosungores tenza dindigi nyumu sebi sebadi ta ani toma delaya di nyumu sebi sebadi yori yomar sedi ta pekishim chagores ro yori yomar sedi odichigres.
Now, another point that comes up in this section is the statement that the actual refuge is the Dhamma, as it says, the Dhamma to be Nirvana, which is the actual refuge. So this is a crucial point, taking the Dhamma to be the actual refuge. We begin with, first of all, recognizing that all of us seek happiness and none of us wants to suffer. So all of us in that sense are seeking the state of liberation. We wish for Nirvana. So then when we look at the word Nirvana in the way that it is rendered into English, to go beyond suffering, to transcend sorrow, here sorrow and transcending sorrow is taken to be the elimination of afflictive states of mind. The complete exhaustion in which anger, attachment, and so forth have been eliminated. This is what Nirvana is. This is what transcending sorrow means, to eliminate anger, attachment, and so forth. And then a person that has completely eliminated anger, a person that has eliminated anger, attachment, and so forth is what we call Sangha. A person that has that elimination in the mind stream is what we call Sangha. So one important question that comes up then does such thing exist? Is it possible to eliminate anger, attachment, and so forth? Does this elimination of anger, attachment, and the like, does it exist?
Mariba sebi seba diana, decha sebi seba yoba, shedan sebi seba yoba di, ta drup tugras. Ta mariba sebi seba yoda mese di chal Geshe ondi, ta mariba segi yori yo marsedi. Ko sebi seba yoba, ko segi yo gorasra. Ta segi yori yo marsla ondi, ta ani chota 개체주 직차도 다 세기 여다 메디 아니 말이 봤어야지 로코란 게 ngongol야 아니 때니 거기 따수단 진수디 아니 양타바지 신지 말로바지 이바이나 아니 세유비기 균세 요마로스 그 세유비 균세 시에 요마로스 다 거기 따술디 신줄로지 임바다 뭐여 내수질이야 따 두고 매바이나 아니 디기 도서 뭐여 내술에 땅에 신지 말로비 로직이 땐데 코 아니 세기여바디 줍투고 요레스로.
So then when we examine whether it is possible to reach that elimination of anger or the elimination of attachment, we need to then look at what the basis is for anger, attachment, and so forth. The basis for them is ignorance. Anger and attachment arise on the basis of ignorance. If ignorance is eliminated, also attachment will be eliminated. Or if the elimination of ignorance is something that exists, also the elimination of anger is something that is in existence, and likewise the elimination of attachment is also something that is in existence. It is something that can be done. So we can prove that if ignorance is eliminated, also anger and attachment can also be eliminated. So the main question is, can ignorance be eliminated? This is the most important question, and in order to investigate that, we need to look at what the nature of ignorance is. What is ignorance? And through looking at ignorance, we also recognize that ignorance has a way of apprehending reality, which is erroneous. It is involved with an erroneous apprehension, erroneous engagement of reality. So we understand what reality is. And also we understand that ignorance apprehends reality erroneously. And through that, through understanding that nature, understanding what reality is, ignorance can be eliminated. Whereas in failing to recognize how ignorance is erroneous with respect to reality, which means that we fail to recognize what reality is and how ignorance is mistaken with respect to reality, we're not going to be able to eliminate it.
데르덴자 디마도 베나 아니 착당 단 유무투섬 디직 아니 슈크체중 토니 아니 세지여메야 성담바이나 균린통 토니 자원이니 간주 달로래야직 세지여 삼성 로 코르투야 코르 카부베라스 간스나 간주 규기다 아니 유무투섬도 슈크체다 로 아니 겨 토마면 다다바도 규바인자 딘디직동 성담바나 자원이니 다직 아니 세지다 자원이 여섯 마리 삼삼지마도 로라 코야 카부레도스라 다 비기 전당라야 제니 그 따수디 신줄로 이마인디 아니 율무빈 넷설다 둘니 따에 여반자 제버치에 여반자 아니 다디 로 디리스 디자 안 딘지 토네 드브니 율무빈 넷설다 아니 로 마리비기 따수 님부틴 통두바이나 다 세요 말했어. 단테 통구 매바이나 아니 율기 무윤네순 통이 로 디기 아니 마리비 카딜레야 데니 마리바 점수직 용구여바디다 디 톤다 드고고레스 드투고레스 로 다디기 리바디 디기 따르디다 남산기비기 따르 연에면 디레스로.
When we look at afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, ignorance, and so forth, we can recognize that they arise at different intensities. We have intense anger, intense attachment that operate at times in our mind stream. And there is also the continuity of those afflictive states of mind. And when we recognize the intensity of our afflictive states of mind and also how long they persist. And also we can say that those afflictive states of mind operate in a mind stream since down without beginning and up until now. You might then think that it is way too hard to eliminate afflictive states of mind, to the point where you think that it's impossible given how intense they are and how long they've been operating in a mainstream, it is impossible to eliminate them. It's too hard. But then, rather than looking at their intensity and the continuity of our afflictive states of mind, if rather than that, we look at the nature of ignorance, for example, and juxtapose it with what reality is. Like, for example, we look at the reality of objects, and then we observe how ignorance apprehends these objects. We can see how ignorance and reality do not accord with each other. If we fail to recognize how the reality of objects and how ignorance apprehends them is discordant, if we don't see that, we're not going to be able to eliminate ignorance. The key for eliminating ignorance is to see how the way that it apprehends reality, the way that it apprehends objects, and the way that they exist do not agree. If you can see their discordancy, that would be the key for eliminating ignorance. So I'm going sorry, and this is the last thing the Geshe said, and this is what Buddhist philosophical view pertains to, understanding the reality of objects.
사마를 율 차고 다 사마 심주 제거 슬라나 배 아니 사마율 데바도 얘네 디츠 듀와이나 난술다 네츠니 토니 아니 domgap 투고르스라 인자 난술다 네츠니 부토니 시온디기 아니 민델이야 뎀바니 세데디 테레스타 롱안 뎀바니 세데 다 뎀바니 토리야 심주치야티 디차고르스타 뎀바니 토리야 직 심주 야부지 아니 제발이야 뎀바니 원트바 제발이야 다 원트 딩인게 몽구다 산지 좀 되는 이즈비기다 갸가르 펜루소 아니 손래야 시준 시에지레 모두 란답기 아니 제투야 카부쇼지로 왔어 덴자 갸오름지 뒤따도 다지 아니 고물루 yaps을 소바 아니 자바송가 바 yaps을 소비기 직 아니 따위 남자 때라 파디위 쇼도조페 아니 개침부리 송대디 아니 넘버 산기비 추 싸발에 투데요 봐 로, 추 야부지 차다마차디 아니 비기 따위 남자 야부지 아니 때라 팝투마둘이야 라레 데반자 디진 송거라서 디마도지 랍자니지 우르 갸 아니 지 에리 말람 갸고리 아니 틀레 용고리 아니 초바 퓨고리 야부레 세베 소르진 로데바나 찌다 야부레스로 이나야 아니 추 양타바치 차야 디페마스 카부레도스로
Which means that our goal is to develop an insight into reality, to be able to see reality as it is. In order to do that, what we need to see is that the way that things appear to us and the way that they exist in actuality disagree. Things do not exist in the way that they appear. So in investigating how things do not exist in the way that they appear to us, then we need to look at objects. When we use the word objects, we refer to everything that exists. And you might think that actually, since there are so many things that exist, it is impossible for me to look at each and every thing and to see how it does not exist in the way that it appears to me. It is impossible to look at everything that exists and see that the mode of appearance and the mode of existence disagree. But there is a way of bringing all of those things that exist into a summary, to look at the summation of that, to look at the summation of appearance and existence into the two truths. So appearance and existence are summarized into the two truths. And when you analyze those two truths, you can then come to the conclusion, make determination with respect to the two truths. And in order to do that, we rely upon the teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, and also the teachings of the great Indian masters. We do that because if we try to develop that understanding just by ourselves, it's going to be quite hard. It's going to be too hard to do it just by our own without using the writings of great masters that have been here before. So we rely upon the writings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama says this, therefore it is really important to rely upon the writings of the protector Nagarjuna, an Indian master, together with his spiritual children. Also to look at the writing of the great Tibetan master, Lama Tsongkhapa. And those masters had made determinations pertaining to the view, which means that through them we can understand the philosophical views that you find in the Dhamma, which means that our ability to understand the philosophical view depends upon our ability to make such determinations depends upon studying those Dhamma presentations. So we might then take a certain approach to a practice. We might receive some Dhamma talk or Dhamma advice. We might make some prayers or offerings, recitations, and so forth. And all of them are good. All of them, it's not to say that it's not good. All of them are good, but still, without starting to make certain determinations with respect to reality, how things exist, and seeing that things do not exist in the way that they appear to us, it's going to be really hard to have a pure Dhamma practice. Sorry.
Dembani tolaya and Jebachondi, Penda Chansronda, then do you be the chick and yons ya chick shinding, pardon the touch ten duta on the no shock Seribagi, and it be the ting tolaya, Jebachedanki, Ribajoras, or Duzugi, and a Rilam the young Jim and how don't the number Sanjibi. Davitoli, Chebachele, Jatamba, and a pendle shoe Yungus, some good dosra, so the Yamuski made in. Then the cousin Chebachetan Rodi, Chebachetan Rodi, any Kapsho Chikba Drogdosra, DGD, any Cheba Sabradrech, Kanji, something sabut down to each a Yungures, Kaju, something sabut down a tea tsugi, any Nelutsu Montreadi, Shuchia Yungros.
So a topic of investigation then becomes the two truths. So we analyze and investigate the two truths, and we have also an explanation of reality is found in contemporary science. For example, looking at the makeup of certain things, looking at atomic level and so forth. It seems that the way that the Buddhist approach to analysis and investigation and the scientific approach to analysis and investigation of material things, atomic levels, subatomic levels, and so forth, are actually going in the same directions. You could say that they're moving together in a similar direction. So you perform such analysis, and the deeper you dig in your analysis, the more profound and subtle your understanding becomes. And then on that basis, you can see reality in a way that is more subtle, more profound, and more in accordance with what is real.
There do Dige and the Marik with that Sultan, you get Nelunim Drondi, you get Nelula Cheondi, you didn't Tangan Namjichi, and a Sugda, Dada, Treda, Roda, Rexasichi, Lavdale Soba, and the Saman of Pigi, Pa Cheondi, and it been Zutu such meba. You didn't never did any the Muyu Ratrugoras, a ditron digi, Tam Mari with that Sultan, you Muyu Nimbudi, Ramatuva Chaundi, that you Muyu Nisula Tenita, Dembaseti Muyu Teni, Geshe Digidi, and Maribadi, that's Lova Imagic, but Dindi Tonda, Drugures. Tangan shoot Sabota Regmar Kanji, Tinditon the Drundi, Mariva the Shinjula in Bati troop. Mariva Shinjula in by Gabden Semameva Druinza, and Segi over the river Titon the Drugores.
So in this way, we see how ignorance has a certain view of reality. Then we also investigate reality objects and such, and we see the way that they exist. And we come to see that the way that ignorance views reality and what reality is disagree with each other. So what we mean to say is that when we look at how ignorance apprehends reality, objects around us, like for example, object of the senses, forms and sounds and smells and taste and tactility and so forth, ignorance apprehends them as if they exist in and of themselves, objectively. Whereas when we actually analyze those objects, forms and sounds and smells and so forth, upon analysis and investigations, we see that they cannot be found. They do not exist objectively, which means that the way that ignorance apprehends them and the way that they exist in reality disagree with each other. Ignorance, therefore, has an erroneous way of apprehending reality, apprehending those objects, which means that ignorance has no support of valid cognition, and therefore ignorance can be eliminated.
The maribita sukan drogores ra nansul the trumebadi ngoyo netsulia shimjukchiondi any ratugyoras tinza ngoyo netsun tombi lodi kazuski any yagi kombal down to a tea tsugi any shinjulo the shooting lodi any shukchondroya nyondroya tar samedundroya di yobadi hiton drogoras ra tiris the nenga tiris.
So the point is that we analyze the way that things appear to us and the way that they exist. We see that when ignorance is mistaken with respect to the appearances that dawns to ignorance, and when we analyze reality, we recognize the erroneous mode of operation of ignorance. And when we recognize this erroneous mode of apprehension, ignorance starts to lose its power. It becomes weaker and weaker, smaller and smaller, to the point in which it can be completely eliminated at the end.
This that di ani ngazuda ani teba shawa samda ani chi kyabs chese samgi bigi tachi ani tsenga danya so dit samgi ani ratho tuyaji remodas kanji ani sherabgi rangi sherabgi tobgi chegoyaji mato. Tinzang anzu kadduina yaji any jizun jambi and the sort of there. Jizun jambi and the capture there, the sheriff la jizun jambia, sheriff the kitchen with shoes chaganza or dindi redos in the kanji rangi namchu the test compel tamatuana, and shang jekona lea ju devaina, and moyo nesudi, tontuyadi, yunguyo maris, yunguyo maris ra.
If we just use faith or simply go for refuge, if we recite mantras and so forth, it's not going to be enough in order to eliminate our own ignorance. We need to develop the power of our own wisdom. And since we need to develop the power of wisdom, we can also rely upon Manjushri. We can do some recitations, recite the mantra of Manjushri to make application to Manjushri. Manjushri for us is the embodiment of wisdom. So we can rely upon things like that in order to support the development of our wisdom. But our wisdom needs to be put to use in a process of analysis and investigation. Without making sure that wisdom is developed in this way, it is not going to develop on its own accord.
Ichi nyeba dindi yungu yo saris ra danganda ichi yos dindi ngeba nyesus lagme darwa ina ngepena nga pero chi shabana ngi jawarum jukundun la ya tungwanji tsar mamu shiores ra tungwanji tsar mamu shiore tungwanji sedi shiu chi tsa chimbu re tsa chimbu tsigores ina tungor nalo la sonsha yutozo kandanda jina di tagdaji tegyo na mena samsung toba di Toba yours, the penning it Toba chick lava in the ra. Any Tungur Naloya chick Manzu tama ani shiro di ludi ani jalula trusej jalula trusej sonyores dingi ani ngamado na kyuni kelen chi tugmesta jalula khandra tru dan jalula trus lawndi ngara sambala ya jalula trus lawndi lud peti ani chi sem di sangi ondi gi luden di nyam du ya chi ani tabajila ya timdu gi nawando chi korni ani jalula trus ya di kelen tugmesra kelen tuge
de titolo kakil titolo kakishini netsan
Ajida.
kelen malenga de la singin do
Chiza.
kelen men dan di kelen sakare min tambotis kogoro
Chiza dichilada dipeyabuda de konsulchilam da dire. Tambo sozi chik shimbayna tene ani kelen cheyada a nyamlen cheyachik. Sozi kai mashi mijik labshe yu tagaran sam dedabana pek masaba kabo.
So then when we look at the importance of analysis, investigation, and developing some knowledge, we can see for ourselves how it does affect our spiritual development, our spiritual development, our practice. Like, for example, Geshe said that for him, he attained teachings from his Holiness Dalai Lama quite a few times. Like, for example, the Kala Chakra empowerment, one of the empowerments that his Holiness has given before. Actually, Geshe received that empowerment from his Holiness a few times. So it is considered to be a really important set of teaching, considered to be a very precious empowerment. But then Geshe says that when he still thinks of what is taught in the context of Kala Chakra, even though it is regarded as so important and so precious set of teachings, particularly when you get it from someone that is so highly acclaimed like His Holiness Dalai Lama, what does it actually teach, the Kala Chakra? Is it precise or is it not precise? Is it correct or is it incorrect? It's hard to make such determinations. In a sense that, for example, one of the statements that you get in the Kala Chakra Tantra is that at the end, the body will disappear into the rainbow body. So what does it mean? Geshe was thinking about it before. So does it mean, for example, when you become a Buddha, when your mind then attains the grounds of a Buddha, then it brings along the body together into the state of Buddha, and that would mean that the body disappears into the rainbow body and so forth. What does it actually mean? So Geshe was asking me if I believe that the body disappears into the rainbow body. So in my conversation with Geshe, I said, well, first of all, I need to understand those terms, just to say that I agree with that, or I disagree with that, I believe in that, or I don't believe in that. I have to understand what we're discussing. So to begin with, I don't have the foundation. I don't know what a rainbow body is and what the process is. So I cannot make such determinations of I believe or not believe, I accept or not accept. And Geshe said that this is actually getting to the heart of things. In order to be able to make such determinations, first of all, you need to develop some understanding of what you're discussing.
Terida penanganzu namki jadi chavasta nimashana peshi jasjatamba ani jasharia imbadosi redendo asra ti ani namka tongban su jadi shen pa ye di namka tongbal pa ye draji mado saja shenjila ke draji tindi khaya maros o dinan shingi nganzu ludi ani jongashik dutengi jongashik dutengi 속발 때니 트위어버디 시부레스라 더 디기 시도디 아니 남킨 종아생지 남키 둘세지 시잘에 남키 둘세지 디 어디래 딘자 아니 종아시츠 아니 그 두텐수 소야기 시도디 남키 둘때니 수속도스 딘자 파 아니 토리아디아 아니 판 토론디아 남키둘 간지 남칼라파 파니 예드레지 디 컨트징 거슬라디 땡인증 그 또비 비기 추초자규디 땡인증 그 또비 아니 파 아니 토리아지 니바지 용구여서레스 디 리바드 간이 드루 거슬라디 난주기 베나 파미 쿠다 비기 아니 둘 타모질이야 아니 남산집이 쇼는 시다나야 아니 남시 슈지니 아니 도천 순dü니 류 트베지도스 아디 착생부터기 로 착생부터기 도천이야 샘슈니 아니 도천 수초니 류스 트브투가 난신기 아니 땡긴증 것도기 딘지수 초자규디 파토르투요서리스 야산이사 드로고 some 마니에발 가유고 some 수들코라 만수 파타디 도도 슈저데이냐 판 토론디 비기 도천 참무 란신 큐도라스 도천 참무디 아니 칼에 드로고요 말고 남칼라판 팀도야지 어디 디레스 라운딩 이시 삼나라 나라 삼나라야 되지 오늘 다 디지 인사레 삼삼로지 인게반은 이거 말다 니 시니 테스치 아니 시온디기다 아니 류예더셋 어디 고직 지라고 알았다 디 간지 소수 야니한테 제바지 겨울음식 송리 학둔도 지 세리비숑 따르다 남비 따르니 추자니 송에디 겨울음식 찍고 소리지 단답을 제가 알았어
죄송한데 정확히 두어 디 남게 두어라
남기 둘라 때는 추
전 남게 두어야 디 뱀포레 소레 간데지나
다 뱀보다 다 숙징 소다 샤고 그러다 이내야 안주 지금 렉샤 여버든지 동상 찾으러 동비기 찾지
저 렉자
렉샤 세운디 파 렉기 여버기 딘지 지금 락바지 인사마다 다 간진 종아시기 둘레 아니 차와지 지단 드렌세 참무슈시다 다 딜리 차지 아니 남기 둘세지
So, for example, in this presentation of the Kala chakra, when we start to think about it, when it says that the body disappears into what is called a rainbow body, when we think of a rainbow, when a rainbow appears in the sky, it depends upon certain conditions, right? So rain and sunlight and so forth. Then when that rainbow disappears, it's not that the rainbow then moves to another place, to another physical location. It disappears, you can say, into an empty space or into an empty sky. It doesn't go somewhere else, but it does, you can say that it disappears into an empty sky. So similarly, when we then think of the body and how, first of all, the body comes to be, how the body is formed, it is, first of all, the body is made of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. And there are particles attributed to earth, water, fire, and wind. So in the process of conception, we have the meeting of sperm and ovum, and to them enters a consciousness that comes from previous lives. And then gradually the body develops, which means that first of all, the body develops from substances, which means that those substances also depend upon particles. So the body is made of particles, but then the coming together of those particles and developing into a body depends upon the consciousness being together with them. And that consciousness was projected by attachment and so forth, which means that through the force of attachment, a certain aggregation of particles came to be. So we have the particles of earth, water, fire, and wind, which are the four elements. In turn, they said that they depend upon space particles. Now, I try to have a bit of discussion with Geshe with respect to what space particle means. Is it like form? Is it matter? And so forth. It seems that kind of it is considered to be something that is more subtle than earth, water, fire, and wind. Then, so through the force of attachment, we have the coming together of these particles to form a body. Then through the force of your practice, when you develop concentration, which is developed through the power of the mind, then you can make those particles break apart or disperse. So Geshe reckons that maybe we can say that disappearing into the rainbow body would mean just, rather than the coming together of those particles on an atomic level to form a body through the power of, when at least from a Buddhist perspective, through the power of attachment and so forth, then rather than following that process, you develop concentration and making those, and through it, at some point, through the force of concentration, you can make the body disperse on an atomic level. And maybe that is the meaning of disappearing into the rainbow body. Now, Geshe said that it's not that necessarily he realized that point, but this is one way, or this is his way of thinking about this statement of disappearing into the rainbow body, and how you can develop a certain power of concentration that does affect certain things, such as, for example, your body. So in that sense, the way that we think about it, either from a scientific perspective or the way that we think about it from a Buddhist perspective, as his honest Dharma often does in bringing both Buddhist way of thinking and scientific way of thinking can agree with each other. It seems that his honest Dalai Lama is quite special or quite unique in being the one that can bring those two things together in a way that agrees with each other.
아니 제단이 더 미스인다라 더 소수 샘나려야 직 도바여 되기디 아니 가와드로 가와되나야 직 도바디 털어야 상무단지 더 용어도 하서라 더 도나 맹인 짐바나 고 도나 요 말마도 직 도나 용인 더 콤지 용인 짐바나 직 비길이야 간두 질레바나 람상 디 털어야 아니 도바사 아니 도바디기 직 렌지 카드나 직 디기 렌지 라야기 상로지 코르더스 내가 딘디로지 이어스로 가라라 비 탭지 비 카친 데마데나야 직 도바사자 유디티 어두 시온디 참자라야 디직 렌스로지 라온디기 야 믹스에기 소소소 비 기부로지 차야도스로 난 딘디로지 라 참자라.
Which means that if your attitude, if your approach to that is asking questions and raising doubts, you will always, whatever you study, whatever you read, you will have doubts and questions that will arise in your mind. And it will make whatever you study come alive. In that, if you study a certain text, if you read a certain text, if you start to see contradictions, small contradictions or greater contradictions, things do not fit in your mind, through that doubts and questions arise. And when they arise, you can always look for answers for your doubts or questions within whatever you study. Which means that you don't just read through a certain text and suffice with that. You go deeper into that. And through that, Geshe feels that you enjoy the process of studying. At least this is Geshe's approach to the way that he reads text, and really enjoys that. Rather than just reading one page after the next, he raises questions and doubts with respect to whatever he reads, and then the process of study and inquiry becomes more interesting.
dan zinda chiwa nyamdu zinda tao dan mi mangbu mi jara tindin du chini ane pe tsoba tso len jangi len jab chiwa tangi chiwa da tu chiwa digi da di kila ya chik ane pe tsoba yakbu chik pagila ya chik chiwa tang ane pe chik len tsangi kaw kala ya len jama tuya tindi kaw kala ya len jam ni pe chiwa tsamang gado ya ro tindi dan tindi yungures din yung digi pa chik 마 샤레온디기 직 람간데 말레나야 직 셈바디 기부로지 간지 디니모델이야 쳐라드는 쩌바 약부치 쩌토바나 레 약부치 껴토바나 아니 베 기부여스 디니만 니와기 다 깁시로디 디차기여스 디나신로지 단다 임바네 직 소소레야 직 도바 여교직 라 양페자 셈바로 때 도바지사니 안 디지베 까우칼레 니만 맘부릴레 상당 거야도지 어두 디 통렌로지 라운디기 아니 배 기부차야로스키 용군도 때 미소소스러워서 메카시 벤 참겸로나 아니 기부슈 설대야 메카시 지금 잠을 똥 비기 돈의 기부 설대야 메카시 칼라야고 사는 슈 기부 설대야 직직 열어 미래의 시간도 니 무슨나 약슈로디 아니 기부슈로디 비기 빼자지 때즉 독주지 동롱로지 디기 랜드도 소수지 직 라바나 믹스에 난 디기우로 진도스라
Such process of investigation through raising doubts is the process that you follow when you go into the debate ground in the monastery that Geshe comes from. So you have your classmates. Sometimes you have hundreds of classmates that study the same year with you. And every day you go into the debate ground for a few hours. And in a traditional debate, you have two roles. You have the person asking the questions. The person is standing up, and then you have the person sitting down, and that person needs to answer those questions. And you're trying to bring each other to contradiction, to have contradiction either in the position, in the position that the person sitting is holding, and the person that is trying to attack this position. So when you then follow the process of debate, you come across questions that you find that you find answering them is difficult. Then you turn to someone that is considered to be really good, right? Good debater, someone that knows the material well, and sometimes they cannot answer your question, or sometimes you also bring them to internal contradictions. Sometimes you debate with someone that is really good, that knows scriptures really good, and they cannot answer your questions, or they, you get them to have contradictions or problems with the position that they hold. And Geshe remembers that sometimes those discussions and debates linger for a few days, and it really makes the mind become engaged. And when you go home, then your mind is still happy, still buzzing from the debate that you've just had. So at least Geshe said that when he reflects back upon the time that the decades that he spent in his monastery, they were really happy times where kind of the mind was engaged in that discussion, and sometimes this kind of happiness and satisfaction lingers for quite a long time. Of course, we are different in relation to what we enjoy. Some people enjoy hanging out or traveling, or enjoy different types of food, or kind of some people enjoy drinking, different things. So of course we are different to each other. At least Geshe said that his in this life, what he enjoyed the most was those debates, which gave him this mental satisfaction, which sometimes continues for quite a few days.
냠용 용이지나 배 마시버 되니 아니 초기 부지기어레스 비길이야 직 아니 간주다 직 제당게 비기다 아니 미치존나로야 다직 젠섬다 차당다 직 젠더 비기 직 제로든 디직 제워서 직 열었다 있다고 디그 그랑싱 딘디 메바 딘디긴 젠섬 메바 직 비기 로종 코랑 레야 직 샘수지 아두스 존디게 마제나라야 초 믹스와 직 테키부 슈저스 디타가스게 트레셔라.
For those of you who have done some debate before, if you have done some debate before, then you might be able to relate to what Geshe is saying. There's this special feeling, really special feeling that comes through engaging with those debates over some time. So of course, in society, when we engage with each other, sometimes we do that with a certain degree of attachment, a certain degree of jealousy or competitiveness and so forth. But when you take on such debates and you do them without that sense of competitiveness, jealousy, and so forth, really develops that particular sense of joy, particular sense of happiness. It is devoid of jealousy, competitiveness, and so forth, it becomes this really special, distinguished type of joy. Mm. Thank you. We will leave the text here for today.
Lamrim.
Mm. And we will finish with the final Lamrim dedication. Just put it on the screen in a second. For my two collections, vast space that I've amassed from working with effort that is practiced for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eyes blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice, using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion. May I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I've discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, who once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace. And may the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this great path to enlightenment completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may ocean of prosperity spread everywhere. Thank you.